In a landscape where the legitimacy of elections has never been more fiercely contested, North Carolina finds itself at the heart of a critical judicial battle that holds profound implications for the democratic process nationwide. 5 months have passed since the contentious 2024 election, and despite one candidate, Justice Allison Riggs, leading in the vote count over her opponent, Jefferson Griffin, the final outcome remains mired in uncertainty. As the state grapples with a pending decision that could upend decades of electoral practice, this investigative report delves into the legal intricacies and partisan dynamics shaping one of the nation's most contentious electoral disputes. The backdrop to this saga is a scenario all too familiar in contemporary politics: an unresolved election, prolonged legal wrangling, and accusations of voter disenfranchisement that cut across partisan lines. Justice Riggs, speaking from her position on the North Carolina Supreme Court, recounts the grim anniversary of the disputed election. With a palpable sense of urgency and responsibility, she details the current status of the case before the North Carolina Court of Appeals, a critical juncture in a dispute that has held the state's political future in the balance. At the core of the controversy lies a challenge to the validity of 68,000 ballots cast by eligible voters. Among these are votes from North Carolina residents who followed all established guidelines, including those cast by voters who are overseas or actively deployed in the military. The challenge, as articulated during oral arguments, is not aimed at correcting a clerical error or updating voter registrations. Rather, it is a direct assault on the fundamental democratic principle that every legally cast vote must be counted. Justice Riggs recalls that during the appellate hearing, her opponent's attorneys made it unequivocally clear that their objective was to discard these ballots. The implications are staggering. If the North Carolina Court of Appeals rules in favor of the motion, the votes of thousands of citizens, among them Riggs's own parents, would be nullified, effectively disenfranchising a significant portion of the electorate. A particular flashpoint in this legal battle is the use of the UACAVA ballot, a federal instrument designed to simplify voting for deployed military personnel. In North Carolina alone, 32,000 military voters utilized this system. It is important to note that prior to the election, all relevant electoral authorities, including the State Board of Elections and county offices, had published guidelines confirming that overseas voters were exempt from producing a copy of their picture ID. The fact that these instructions were available well in advance of the election underscores the legitimacy of the ballots cast under this system. Yet, the current legal challenge seeks to retroactively alter these rules. Riggs emphasizes that this approach is tantamount to rewriting the electoral framework after the fact, a maneuver that would punish voters for adhering to the established guidelines and undermine the integrity of the election process. The judicial landscape in North Carolina adds another layer of complexity to the case. The appellate court, where the decision currently hangs in the balance, comprises a panel with a pronounced partisan tilt, 2 Republicans and 1 Democrat. Meanwhile, on the state Supreme Court, where Riggs serves, the partisan split stands at 5 Republicans to 2 Democrats. Although Justice Riggs has recused herself from directly ruling on the election dispute for reasons of conflict of interest, the remaining body is poised to make a decision that could have far-reaching consequences. It is a situation emblematic of the broader political climate where partisan affiliations have seeped into institutions that were once considered bastions of impartial justice. Beyond the state-level proceedings, the case is set to enter the federal judicial arena if state rulings appear to contravene federal law. The initial stage will be a trial in the Eastern District of North Carolina under the watch of Chief Judge Myers, a Trump appointee. Should the outcome at this level not resolve the core issues, the matter will advance to the 4th Circuit Court of Appeals. This court, which comprises 15 judges appointed under varying administrations, presents its own set of partisan considerations. 8 judges were appointed by Democratic presidents, while 7 were nominated by Republicans. Ultimately, no matter the state-level outcome, the case could escalate to the U.S. Supreme Court, a body that has historically exercised caution in altering electoral laws close to an election to avoid undermining public confidence in the process. Justice Riggs draws attention to the broader legal principles at stake, particularly the idea that disenfranchising eligible voters represents a clear violation of both federal law and the constitutional guarantee of equal voting rights. As a former voting rights attorney, she has spent over 15 years litigating cases that challenge discriminatory electoral practices. Her argument rests on a simple yet profound premise. Once the law has been clearly established and communicated, there should be no retroactive punishment for following those rules. The notion that any eligible vote should be discarded is not merely a bureaucratic misstep. It is a fundamental assault on the democratic process itself. The discussion extends well beyond the particulars of this individual case, touching on a broader national concern, the erosion of trust in democratic institutions. When voters see that legally cast ballots might be dismissed because of partisan machinations, the very foundation of the electoral system is called into question. The integrity of elections relies on the unwavering commitment of judicial bodies to uphold the rule of law, free from the influence of political expediency. In her impassioned remarks, Justice Riggs warns that if the current trajectory continues, if courts begin to subvert established laws to suit partisan objectives, the result will be a profound undermining of democracy. The case in North Carolina is not an isolated incident. It is a bellwether for what may come if the independence of the judiciary is compromised. In examining the partisan dynamics at play, it is impossible to ignore the significant influence of the MAGA Republican Party in this scenario. The narrative, as articulated by Riggs, is one in which electoral outcomes are manipulated through judicial channels. With a court system where partisan loyalties are no longer a relic of the past, but an active force in legal decisions, the promise of impartial justice appears increasingly hollow. The decision on whether to discard the 68,000 ballots, many of which come from traditionally underrepresented groups such as young voters, voters of color, and military personnel, stands as a stark reminder of the potential for systemic disenfranchisement when political motivations override constitutional safeguards. The stakes are further elevated by the fact that this case implicates not only state law, but also federal statutes, such as the Help America Vote Act. These federal mandates are designed to ensure that every eligible vote is counted and that barriers to voting are minimized, particularly for populations such as the military and overseas voters. Riggs makes it clear that if even one eligible vote is discounted, it is a direct violation of these federal protections, a scenario that she vows to contest vigorously in federal court until the potential for this dispute to escalate into a landmark case before the US Supreme Court adds an additional layer of urgency to the matter. Yet, amidst the legal maneuvering and partisan posturing, there remains a fundamental question. How can faith in the democratic process be maintained when institutions that are supposed to protect voters seem to be acting in ways that are contrary to their foundational purpose? Justice Riggs offers no easy answers, but her message is unequivocal. She calls on every North Carolinian, regardless of political affiliation, to demand that courts act as impartial guardians of constitutional rights. In doing so, she not only defends the immediate interests of the 68,000 voters at risk of disenfranchisement, but also issues a broader warning to all who value the principles of democracy. As the legal battle continues, the fate of the disputed election hangs in the balance. The outcome of the upcoming appeals, both at the state and federal levels, will set an important precedent for how electoral disputes are resolved in the future. In a climate where political interests increasingly overshadow legal integrity, the case serves as a critical test of the nation's commitment to ensuring that every eligible vote is honored. Justice Riggs's steadfast determination to defend the rights of all voters, even those who did not cast their ballots for her, speaks to a broader vision of justice that transcends partisan lines. In conclusion, the unresolved election in North Carolina is more than a local legal dispute. It is a microcosm of the challenges facing democratic institutions across the country. The battle over 68,000 ballots is emblematic of a larger struggle to preserve the sanctity of the electoral process amid an era of heightened partisanship and judicial politicization. As Justice Allison Riggs continues to champion the cause of every eligible North Carolina voter, her fight underscores a universal truth that the protection of constitutional rights must prevail over the narrow interests of political power. The coming months will reveal whether the courts can rise above partisan pressures and deliver justice that is both fair and true to the principles of our democracy.